Welcome to another episode of Before You Kill Yourself with your host, Leo Flowers. I am Leo Flowers. Today's guest is Chef Mac. Now, Chef, do you go by McClowski or is it Chef Mac? What do you prefer?
I mean, my brand is Chef Mac. My this book I publish is Chef Mac. When I work in restaurant, I go by Noodle Guy or whatever the old ladies want to call me.
Whatever the old ladies want to call you. I feel you. You know, after a certain age, they can say whatever they want.
All my girlfriends in the restaurant are like 85 years old, and they're in the back making dumplings. They just kind of like grab my butt and tell me, more cabbage, more carrots, go get it, white boy.
Chef Mac, you and I have a history. We go way back. You used to work at Headblade, and you had such a vibrancy and a buoyant energy at that time. You were just an all around great guy. But you know, it's that thing of we don't know what people are going through. And I recently posted on my Facebook that I was going to be talking about divorce on my podcast.
Right.
And you posted on my Facebook that, hey man, I went through I'm paraphrasing, but basically like I went through. My dog Portis. You said my dog Portis helped me get through the divorce. I was thinking about jumping out of my window when I found out my wife was cheating. My dog saved my life and kept me grounded, literally. I'd be happy to talk about it. Talk to us about that, Mac.
Okay, so I got married when I was 30 years old, and we were happily married, I would say, for about 5 years or so. When the relationship kind of skidded, and she had moved out already and was vocal about, I got a new boyfriend. Life isn't what you think it is. It was a very sad, depressing time. I think like the whole topic, I think a lot of men and women can relate to like this being a very difficult relationship ender on a marriage level. It's like a little bit different than like just having a girlfriend or a boyfriend. So it was like something that I think a lot of men take really personally when it comes to like major relationship failure. So whoever's fault it was, I'm not pointing fingers. I'm just saying like when it happened to me, it was an extremely depressing time. I saw your post and I was like, wow, this actually speaks to me pretty closely because I was like suicidal and honestly thinking about jumping out the window on Christmas to forget that the whole thing had ever happened. And what you wrote about made sense to me because I think you were interested in talking to people who had coped with major relationship loss, not based around alcohol, drugs, food addiction, or whatever the coping mechanisms that most people probably would use to deal with like relationship loss. And when I was standing on a chair, like ready to jump out the window, I looked over and my dog was sitting there like looking at me like, hey, if you jump out that window, I need to get fed still. And I was like, oh, I have like a responsibility to take care of something besides myself. So like, I can't do this. I have to, care for this animal that was like actually a product of my marriage. When my ex-wife wanted to have a child and I decided we should try her with a puppy first. And so the dog that we brought in to kind of fill that child void thing sort of saved my life and gave me a purpose to stick with it and not jump out the window.
So take me back, Mac, to what were the thoughts of, there's so many reasons why a person would want to end their life when they find out that their wife is with someone else. Sometimes they take it personally, like maybe I'm not enough as an individual, or my world is collapsing, or I'm going to lose everything, the house, the money, what was so painful about that experience for you?
I think initially it was just like the fear of failing at something that was really important. And I think like the commitment to get married was a big deal for me. And, you know, you stand there and you say in front of somebody that you're willing to do life and limb for some other person and compromise and do all, you know, like do all these things that you think like a lifelong relationship would need. And so when that fell apart, I felt like a failure. Like, I mean, I felt like I had done something wrong. Like it was my fault. Like, I had failed in like a major way, not just like I had a job that I wasn't good at, or I had a girlfriend that didn't work out, but it was like, you know, a commitment level that was a lot higher to me. And when it didn't work out, I felt like completely demoralized and insufficient, maybe like in a lot of ways, because I didn't make it work at that level.
You talked about guilt, right? Like I did something wrong, like I did something bad, I failed. What else was under there? You talked about the, you know, feeling demoralized, and so if you failed, then what? What do you think was going to happen as a result of your failure?
I honestly thought like I will never have a healthy relationship again after this, because if I couldn't handle this at the marriage level, then it's not going to be worth it for me to try to date. I'll be single forever. I'll always be alone. Like those kind of feelings were kind of like what I was experiencing at that time. Like when, you know, it was all fresh and like, you know, it's a long process. The divorce thing was like 16 months for me. So it was kind of a long time to think about what I had thought I had done wrong, what was my responsibility, maybe what wasn't my responsibility, what she may have done wrong or whatever it was. But like the initial was just kind of devastating, just like thinking that I had wrecked something that should have been like the highest regard relationship of my life as an adult, you know?
Right, because you felt like you committed, you sacrificed, you did all the things that you felt like you were supposed to do to make a marriage work, and then it still failed, and then you felt like, well, I must have done something wrong here, maybe something I missed, and then the thought goes to, I'll never find somebody else again, which speaks to a fear of that you'd end up alone.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I honestly thought at that time, I was 35 when I got divorced, and I honestly thought, I'll just be alone forever now. You know, this is what it is.
And so, with that feeling of being alone, what was scary about that for you, of being alone forever?
I mean, I don't know. At this point in my life, like being alone is different than what it was then. But I think like after you have gone through a marriage, or you've been involved in a marriage, like you don't go into a marriage thinking this might not work out long term. You know, you go into it thinking like this is it, like this is my woman or man, and this is what it's going to be for the rest of my life. And so when all of a sudden that doesn't end up how it works out, I think like it's probably like a common reaction to think like, oh my gosh, if this couldn't work out, what's going to work out? Like, what do I do? Do I just start over and try to find another lifelong partner? Is that even like a concept that makes sense to me at this point? Should I just be alone? Is that what makes more sense? Did I do something wrong? Am I inept? Whatever it is. Yeah, there's a lot of things going through your head in that period of time. Usually, like I would say, in the first like year or so after a separation or a divorce, or you know, the end of any long-term, like meaningful, committed relationship. I don't know. I think like it's a common feeling, and it's a good topic too. I mean, like I thought I was like alone and nobody understood, and I was just like I did something. I was like imperfect in the ways that I thought that I was solid. You know.
You know, I want to highlight something you just mentioned there. You said, I felt like I was alone and no one else understood. And so when we talk about like what was that fear for you of being alone, it was that wow, there's going to be no one else to understand me. What is it about that fear of not being understood that's so scary for you?
Well, when you make like to me like marriage was a huge commitment thing, and I'm not like a commitment phobic person, but um, when you make that commitment to somebody and at whatever fault it is, it doesn't work out. I think like you start feeling like maybe you have inadequacies, or you're not a solid like life partner, or there are issues you need to work on yourself to like be at that level. So yeah, I just felt like like unsure of who I was even.
Talk to
When
me.
I thought I was pretty certain on who I was at that point in my life, but I just felt like, oh my gosh, what is happening? Like, what did I do wrong? Where do I need to improve? How did I screw up?
Right. That certainty of who we were, and now this is you kind of feel forced to like reevaluate and
Yeah.
see like, oh, maybe I'm broken. Like you talked about feeling inept, feeling inadequate, feeling demoralized, and like you'll be alone forever. So we see a lot of black and white thinking in there, right? Like you're 35 and but thinking that you'll never find somebody else ever throughout the course of your life. Mac, I hear you using the word commitment a lot. Uh, what about that word commitment is so resonant for you? Is that something? Is that a message that came from your mom, your dad? Did you hear that message growing up?
I mean, I think like I've been in a lot of like long-term relationships, and I would say I was like committed to all of them. I've never like strayed or like wanted to cheat, or I was like distracted when I was in long-term relationships. And I just think like the marriage part of it is a deeper commitment, not just because like, the government's involved, but it's a it was just a big deal. Like I never wanted to get married. I never wanted to have children. I met a woman who was a lot younger than me, and we were friends for a while, and she was from another country, and she moved to visit some family in Cali, and we happened to both be single at that time. So we started dating, and like it was awesome, you know, like most new things are. And at that point, she was either going to have to leave or to go back because her visa was like expiring, or I could take a chance and we could make that commitment and get married and just kind of like see how it worked. And so I was like, you know what? I'm 30. My life's pretty straight. I have a good job. I got my stuff together. I have a home. I'm willing to try that commitment level to see if it will help this relationship to sustain itself. And so then we got married at the Headblade warehouse like 2 weeks later, and that's where the whole thing started from. And Todd was like he was my guy there, but maybe that's not the common story of how people get hitched, but that was how it worked for us. And like to me, the commitment level was a little bit higher than just like a normal relationship where like I would still be committed, but I wouldn't have that fear of failure as much because it's kind of a lesser deal, if you're not married.
So, but to go back to that word commitment, because I hear two things here that when you talked about getting married to her, you said, let's see if this works out. So even in the marriage, there wasn't certainty, right? Like I think sometimes we kind of forget of the mind state that we had going into a thing. And when we're able to remember how we were viewing it at the time, it allows us to have more compassion for if it doesn't work out. So,
Right.
because, and I want to highlight that because there are a lot of listeners out there who are getting divorced and they've forgotten why they got married or what nudged them in that direction. And for you, it was like, hey, let's see if this works out. Let's see how this commitment thing goes. So that to me speaks of like an experimentation that it might or might not work out.
Yeah. And you're not wrong. I mean, I think all relationships are kind of an experimentation. I would guess generally people probably put a little bit more like classroom time into figuring out if that's the person they want to marry or not. I didn't have that luxury because it was sort of a quick turnaround marriage. But like, I don't think it's that dissimilar. I mean, I think like getting married for a lot of people has different meaning. And certainly like the way that I thought about it possibly working out was different than whatever she thought was possible of working out. But like in like retrospect, it was also like probably the best 5-6 years of my life when we were married. It was like a growing up thing, and I think for both of us. And although it wasn't exactly like the cleanest way to end a marriage, it wasn't so bad. And not like in the big picture, neither of us jumped out the window. So, I mean, it was, we survived it at least. And we actually like communicate like adults and everything still. So, I don't know, man. I mean, I think like the commitment in my mind at marriage level just was a lot more meaningful for me, even though maybe I wasn't taking the relationship as seriously as I may have even taken a relationship as seriously with somebody else that I was more like involved with, like at a longer term at that time, you know, like in the dating process. Like I've had plenty of girlfriends, but that was like, you know, kind of a quick trigger decision for the marriage.
Take me to the moment when you found out that she cheated.
Okay,
Was that the moment where you were also feeling inadequate and inept, or were there other emotions at the time you found out of the infidelity?
It was tough because when I realized that we were starting to have problems, I didn't feel like I had any issues with the relationship. Like I wasn't unhappy. I wasn't like wanting to date other people or wanting to split it off or whatever. So she basically had told me that she was 10 years younger than me. She had like never lived on her own and done all these things that most, you know, 30-year-old women had done as Americans, living, paying bills, have a job, all that stuff. So she basically just told me, I want to live on my own and like do my own thing. I'd never done it before. And I was like supportive, and I helped her look for an apartment, and I was trying to move her out and, you know, show her something that maybe she thought she had missed out on by being sort of sheltered when she was younger and then getting married when she was young. You know, I wasn't like on her all the time for whatever she wanted to do. You know, she could go on road trips with her girlfriends and stuff. And I wasn't like hitting her up like, what are you doing right now? Who are you with? I don't care about that kind of stuff. So I was just trying to like be accommodating. She left on she moved out on Christmas, like a couple, was it like 2012. She moved out Christmas Day. And I remember we were living in downtown LA. We had a condo there, and I knew she was moving out on Christmas. It was a really weird day. We like walked to go have breakfast, kind of like holding hands. Like, I asked her, is this the last time we're ever going to like, you know, be near each other or be close to each other? And she's like, no, it's all good. So we come back home. I make dinner. She's like packing her stuff up after she opened all of her Christmas presents. She's like putting all of these things back into the boxes that I had bought it all in. And then I make dinner. She moved out Christmas, like took all her stuff and left. And I had no idea. Like I had hired a relationship therapist at that time. We were like I was trying to work through it with her, but she had already checked out, and she was kind of dishonest with me about the whole thing. And like the reality was she had been dating somebody else and like was cheating before that. And I just didn't find out about it until that was Christmas time. I didn't find out about it till like March or something of that year. And that was when I like went to the court and like filed the divorce paperwork.
But at the time you found out, what were the emotions that you were feeling at the time you found out?
Honestly, I felt relieved. You know, everything sort of made sense. It wasn't just like, you know, her telling me one thing about how she felt. It was like, oh, you have a boyfriend. That's concrete. If that's the deal, like I'm easy to escape that. But if I think there's like still a hope for us to try to work on our marriage and relationship, then like I'm going to work on it. And as like a man, I think that's kind of like a reactionary thing. Like you don't want to fail at something. There's some kind of problem. You seek resolution. You you try to figure it out. But when I learned like what actually had happened, I was like, oh, that's kind of a relief, because like I don't have to do all this work now. We can just get the divorce and, you know, move on with our lives.
So it kind of it gave you clarity, because now it helped you make sense of all your emotions, and you were kind of relieved and on some level grateful for, like, now I understand what's happening here.
It was oddly relieving.
Wow.
You know, this sounds weird, right? And I remember it was tough in California because the courts were all backed up back then. And finally, like when my divorce had been finalized, it was probably like about a year after she had moved out, or 16 months, something like that, after she had moved out. And finally, I got the papers in the mail. They're like, she's no longer the last name is gone. She changed her name and everything. I texted her and I said to her, just so you know, like I got the documents from the court. And I said, it brought me greater tears of joy than I cried when we got married. And she says, oh, don't be sad. I was like, no, I'm so happy. Like, I'm just so happy that this is like, I don't feel like it was my fault necessarily. I mean, we're both at fault, obviously, but like, you know, when somebody's cheating, it's like it takes two people to tango, I guess. And like, just like finally resolving the whole thing at that point was like one of the happiest days of my life, like happier probably than the day that I got married, just because I had felt so saddened and depressed by this for so many months. Like finally it like gave me a reason to look towards like a positive direction and like move on.
So when did the suicide attempt come into play?
It was before I found out that she had been cheating. So it was like 2 days after she had moved out. And I remember I had gone down to like a bar down the street. They were like, hey, Merry Christmas. And I was like, I'll take 10 shots of whatever and just bring them right now. And I drank all this booze. And then I went back upstairs, and I was like, at that point, it was before New Year's. So it was like the same week basically that she had moved out, where I just didn't know what was going on. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm a failure. I just need to like end this. This is nonsense. Like I did something wrong. I'm at fault, you know? And that was like the moment. It was probably like 3 daes after Christmas, 2 or 3 days after Christmas.
So let's backtrack a little bit and take me into your childhood, Mac. You know, were your parents married?
Yeah. So I was adopted. My sister and I were both adopted from different moms. My parents couldn't have kids. They were like a swinger couple product who were married in the 70s, and they moved from Cleveland to Philadelphia to DC. I was born in Virginia. I got adopted into DC when I was like a year old. And like I said, I had a sister who was a couple years older. I was lucky, you know, like my parents were very solid and kind of rescued me from what would have been a harder life and gave me a lot more opportunity. So my parents were always really supportive and caring and solid. And yeah, I mean, I live with them. They're still together. They've been married for 54 years. I moved out when I was about 16 or 17 to go to college, and then kind of was freewheeling it since then.
And at what age did you find out you were adopted?
I don't remember not knowing. Like when I was a kid, I had these 2 books that always got me into trouble. And one of them was called Where Did I Come From? And one of them was called Why Was I Adopted? And the Where Did I Come From book got me into way more trouble, because it was like, you know, an animated thing that talked about, you know, mommy and daddy loving each other, and daddy parking his truck in mommy's garage, and how it felt like a sneeze. And then 9 months later, the stork came. So I would like share that book with my friends at school, and they would tell their parents about how mommy and daddy had a truck. And it did not go over that well when I was 5 or 6 years old. But I always knew. And like my sister always knew she was adopted, but we both reacted completely differently to it. And I felt like lucky that I had a better life or a better opportunity for life. And my sister, on the other hand, felt slighted and unwanted. So it was interesting to see like how the two of us, lived based on how that living situation worked.
Same situation, different framing of the experiences of it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I have a relationship with my biological mom now. Excuse me. She didn't ever connect with her biological roots. And I think it's just kind of like, I think that's more of like the manifestation of like what you want or what you want to know or what you need to know in your life. And like, I manifested things differently than my sister did. And I looked at things more positively. And then like all these answers came to me. Whereas like she just felt slighted and unwanted and nothing ever materialized in terms of like her questions being answered for her, whoever she was or came from.
Yeah, I can't even imagine what that would be like, knowing you're adopted, and I don't know which direction I would go. If I would be grateful for finding a household that took me in and was caring and supportive, or if I would feel, slighted and unwanted, or maybe both. It might be a mix of those emotions in there. For you, you talked about walking into a bar, ordering 10 shots, and then coming home. When did the drinking for you start?
I mean, back then I drank a lot more than I do now, but on that particular day, I don't really remember. I just was like coping with alcohol. And I know this conversation is not about alcohol. It's about, other things that you use to cope with loss. And like, I'm just telling you what happened that day. Like I don't really remember if I had been drinking much before I went to the bar, but there was like a bar downstairs in the building I lived in. And I just was feeling very depressed. And I went down there I thought I was going to have a beer. And then I was like, I'll take all the bourbon, and then, I was there for about 15 minutes and pounded all this alcohol. And I went upstairs and was like, just feeling like helpless, basically.
Right, because like going back to when we feel like we've done everything right and we've committed and we sacrificed. Did I want to go back to this word commitment? Is this, what did your parents or your mom or your father talk to you about relationships or about what being a man was? Like, what kind of messages about your role in society growing up did they share with you?
That's an interesting one because my mom grew up as like a first generation chicken farmer from Germany. My dad was like a Roman Catholic, like a dude from Philly, and who had been through some tough times in Vietnam and all this stuff. And so like my dad and I have never talked about love, relationships, commitment, or any of these things. My mom is always one who's like, I don't think I like your girlfriend. And like, I don't think either of them really, it was hard because I don't think either of them really raised me in a way that like gave me a lot of information about how healthy relationships worked. All I saw was how the two of them, connected with each other, how they communicated. And like, basically that was it. We didn't have that much in common. They were actually like significantly older than I guess most traditional parents maybe. There was a big age gap, because they couldn't have kids until they decided to get us like in their 40s. And I don't know. I just didn't know much about relationships other than that. Like I was kind of rotting solo and always like wanted to put a lot of effort into my relationships when I was even a kid or younger or in high school or college or whatever, just because I like didn't know much about it and didn't like have a lot of info on what to do or what not to do or what made sense or what didn't make sense or how to treat other people. I was kind of like, didn't have a lot of guidance in that in my growing up years.
How did you witness them handling conflict? Were there arguments? Was there yelling matches? Did they sit down and have a nice amicable way of dealing with things?
We had dinner every night together. That was like something that was like, it was going to happen every night, no matter what anybody had to do. And so that was always like our area to like communicate with each other was during dinner. And my mom was a terrible cook. So like we would always want to eat dinner really quickly and then go on and do our thing. But that was always like the sounding board for like where the problems were in the family, what needed to be communicated better. And sometimes there's a lot of stuff I don't want to hear about, like, hey, Bill, it's been 6 months, so you know what tonight means. And I'm like, I'm good. I'm going to go downstairs now. I don't need to hear about.
You don't want to hear about those shenanigans.
They were on like a calendar schedule when they got older, and that was always weird. I did not enjoy that. But I drank my glass of milk and ate all my vegetables, and that was pretty much it. Like in terms of like them training me on like how to have a healthy relationship with another human, it just never happened. I don't think most parents who do try to train their children on how that should work really would ever even get that much of a response from their children, because it's like a generational thing. It's just so different now, like 40 years apart. It's just a big difference.
Wow, yeah, that is a big difference. I mean, if they had been younger, you may have seen maybe a bit more affection, but the fact that your dad, was a Philly guy, Roman Catholic, and went to Vietnam, like there's not a lot of room for emotions there.
Yeah,
And then
and
your
my
mom,
and my biological mom, who I'm friends with now, she had me when she was 13 years old, and we're like really cool and like tight. I met her for the first time last year in Missouri, and we've been in touch since I was like around 18 years old, and back before cell phones and stuff. And we traded like letters you actually put a stamp on, and kind of grew to know each other through there. And that's an interesting story too. But I'm 44. She's 57. That's kind of unusual.
so yeah, talk to me about, were there any emotions that came up for you when you met her? When you finally met her physically, that you weren't expecting?
Yeah. So she pulls up to my house, and I was living in like a farm property back then with my ex-girlfriend and the dogs. And it was a nice big spot in Missouri. And so she comes up from Arkansas, where she lives, and she gets out of the car, and I went out there to meet her, and we just both like, were just completely in tears, like couldn't stop crying, very emotional, hugging, crying, hugging, crying. We go inside, and like all of the waterworks just kind of stopped, and it was like chatty, 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 chatty. And I cooked her a bunch of food and stuff, but we just like talked all day, all night long. And she spent the night. In the morning, I make her some like, baller pancakes, and she's getting ready to leave, and everything's like totally emotionally, it's fine. But then when we go outside and she's getting in her car to leave, it's just nonstop crying, like waterworks, nonstop, very emotional. So it was very strange. Like the coming and going was very emotional, but the time together was like, just seemed normal.
Wow, and that had to. Was that a feeling of relief also, of like, oh my God, like she feels the way that I feel, to have your emotions validated, especially coming from a household where the emotions really weren't talked about, it seemed like, and then to have somebody mirror how you feel in the moment.
Definitely. It was like the first relatable moment of my life with somebody who I was related to. Like it was like completely obvious that she was my mom, like just by the way we were interacting. Like it was sort of like almost like an out of body experience to like look down and be like, oh my gosh, this actually makes a lot of sense.
Going back to the divorce, usually there's a lot of financial strain that comes with breaking up. I know she was already moving out and had moved out. Did that take a toll on you also emotionally? Or was it a kind of a clean financial break?
I was probably the luckiest man ever through the divorce in terms of financial stuff. When we were married, I took care of her. She didn't really work too much. She had like worked for her auntie or something, but she didn't make a lot of money. She contributed a little bit to our stuff. I owned a condo. I paid for everything. I didn't ask much from her. So when she left, it was definitely a strain because I still had a mortgage to pay and she wasn't contributing, but she didn't ask me for anything. My only expenses were I hired the mediator from that TV show, The Divorce Court, and they took care of everything. I mean, like, I had my ex sign that I didn't have to pay her anything. There was no alimony. It was all like documented and both parties were in agreement. So I got really lucky, honestly. I paid maybe like 10 grand for legal stuff. And then I think I gave her like a TV or something. And that was it, man.
So, I at the beginning of this episode, I referred to you as Chef Mac, and people are like, where does the chefing come into place in all of this? And when I think about chefs, I think about, Anthony Bourdain, rest in peace. And I think
Yeah.
about how stressful being a chef is, right? Because you went from head blade to then
Right.
going back to school and deciding to become a chef, and long hours, like 90-hour weeks sometimes, a lot of injuries, a lot of burns, a lot of cuts,
Yeah.
not the best job security. There's isolation. There could be bullying. It's a high intensity, low control environment. And I bring all that up to say there's a lot of room again, Matt, to once again feel inadequate, inept, to feel lonely. How are you coping with those emotions now when they come up?
I don't feel like that now. I mean, I think part of it's like a balancing thing, because part of creating and being on your feet and working hard in the kitchen for like 70 or 90 hours a week is that you don't really have a lot of time to think too much about other stuff. So you're like focused on your list of things that have to get done so that you can sell beautiful food. And like the personal part of it has to take a back seat. And that's been a challenging thing for me too, because since I became a chef, I try to date because I'm single. And it's like, well, when can you go on a date with me? Well, I can meet you at like 6:30 in the morning for a cup of coffee before I go work for 17 hours. Or like I have a day off every other week, I mean, that's like the most challenging part. Like if I could find somebody here who just wanted to like have sex on Mondays for an hour and a half, I'd be good. But I mean, it's just like that doesn't usually work in terms of like a partner who's interested in doing so. So, like all the other things you mentioned, I don't really feel that. Like, I don't feel the struggles of being in a chef role like in other parts of my life. I think it's beautiful. I make like a lot of fun decisions on my day-to-day life where it's sustainable and fulfilling for me. So like the relationship part would be great, but maybe that's like a ancillary or a bonus at this point. Like, or if I decide to do something else, maybe I'll have more time to focus on somebody else. But chefing is definitely more of a full-time thing than most people are willing to commit to their like professional life. So it just takes away the time you have for a relationship.
Right. And I would imagine at some point there might be bouts of, I would assume, loneliness or disconnection if, when we do get a break. And I understand that, like you said, it's all consuming, working in the kitchen and long bouts of hours and the commitment to it. But I would imagine one might overcommit to it as a way of not dealing with the feelings of loneliness or not coming back to anyone. I know you have your dog.
I mean, I'm not going to lie. I wanted a date an hour before this podcast.
How'd
And
that go?
was all right. I mean, I don't know if I would see her. I mean, she's probably listening to this, maybe, or she will be listening to this. I would definitely see her again. I mean, maybe not, but the interesting thing about being a chef in LA and then moving to Nashville to be a chef is that when you try to do the dating thing, there are a lot less people here that are in your parameters. So like, I can't even use dating apps or anything anymore because they're all in Nashville saying, sorry, bro, you've reached the end of the internet. You know, try to find somebody in the real world because there's no more criteria, you know, no more when they hit my criteria. So, I don't know. I guess I've kind of taken a step back from like seeking that out when I know that I don't have the time commitment to put into a relationship that I know may be worth it. Like I just don't have the resources to do it. And I know that those resources, if they're not there, even if I find the most perfect partner, it's not going to work because I don't have enough to put into it at this point.
So, going back to your dog, being part of what got you off the chair away from the
Yeah.
window, right? What is it about? First of all, what's your dog's name?
His name was Portis,
You
like
said
Clinton
was.
Portis.
He passed away?
Yeah, he died about 3 weeks ago.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a crazy time. He was 16. He's a bulldog. 16 is that's a pretty good run. He was just not able to stand up anymore, and so I had actually like gave him his last bath, put him in his bed, and he just like stayed there for a few days and didn't get up to eat or go to the restroom or anything. And so I called the vet and I had said, Monday's my day off. Can you send somebody at 11? This is like 3 weeks ago. Send somebody at 11 to come put him down and take his body to cremate. And, we just got to do it. He's like, his quality of life is not good. So we have to just do it. So I like brought him this $70 ribeye the night before. And I cooked him this like amazing meal and hand fed him steak in his bed, his favorite bed. And then like next morning, 10 o'clock in the morning, I'm like getting ready to say goodbye. And I look over and he died. And it was like an hour or like 40 minutes before the vet was coming to put him down. It was wild. It was like a wild coincidence. And my other dog was like laying next to him, like crying. I was like, oh my gosh. This just happened. Like timing wise was wild. And it was hard and it's still really hard, but I don't like second guess, like, is it timing right? Cause he died on his own. So yeah, it was like 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago today.
Talk to me. What was it about Portis that you were like, I gotta live for this guy? What was it about your relationship with Portis?
I spent every day, all day with him for 16 years. And, when I worked at Headblade, he came with me every day to work. He was in the warehouse every day. And like the FedEx guy would bring him treats. And like my warehouse guy would like teach him how to skateboard. And he was like, in Headblade videos and stuff. He was not just part of my like personal life. He was part of my professional life. Everybody that I knew, through work loved him. And like, he was just always there, like 24 hours a day. We were like never separated. So it's almost like, think about your longest relationship, even with like friends and family people, like you don't spend that much time together with somebody like that, even though they're an animal, not a person, obviously, but like just so many man hours together, and just the feeling of always having that around you. And even now that I'm gone, I know he's gone, but like I come home and I'm like, oh, do I need to go pick him up and carry him outside? I have a big tattoo of him on my leg. He was like my first dog and just like super important to me.
Where are you feeling that right now, Matt?
I'm a little bit, yeah, you know.
Where in your body are you feeling it right now?
I mean, I'm crying a little bit, but you know, in my heart, you know, he's just like, he was my boy. But I've got this other dog that's like, you know, snoring and farting right behind me. So I know I got to take care of her too. And I got my other dog thinking like, Portis is not going to be around much longer. So I would like to have another dog as like a transitionary thing. And then he lived for like 5 more years. So, I mean, he had a good run. It was just like, I don't know. I would never be ready for him to go.
Was there a funeral? Or
No,
so did you have like a grieving process, a way of remembering Portis? Was there like, did you create a ritual or anything around it?
I mean, every time I take my pants off, I can see his portrait on my leg. So that's like a good way for me to keep him close to me. You know, I have like a lot of artwork and, you know, stuff like that was done throughout his life. I have like a little sculpture and like some painting and stuff. But no, I didn't want to like hold on to his ashes. I thought that was kind of weird. I just like, the vet came, felt his stomach after he had died. It was like, he's full of tumors. You know, he's got cancer. We just picked him up on the bed he loved and cremated him on there. But I mean, he ate all the steak like a good boy the night before. He was a good dog. And honestly, like, the whole reason I responded to your post about this was because, like, I believe for sure, like, if he hadn't been around like 10 years ago, we wouldn't have this conversation even, you know?
Besides Portis, besides being in the kitchen, what else? You know, Portis got you down off that chair and away from the window.
Yeah.
And outside of Portis, outside of being in the kitchen, what's keeping you going on a daily basis? Are you in therapy? Are you journaling? Are you working out? Like, what's giving you strength at this moment?
Yeah, I mean, I'm fortunate to do what I love for a living, which I think a lot of people struggle with. I published a book this year about eating on a diet that I have to eat on because of like food allergies and things like that. I thrive off of like helping other people and celebrating what I'm capable of doing through food, which is something that like most people need to live, right? Food and water. It's kind of essential, maybe shelter. I don't know. I feel fortunate because I get to do things that make people happy. And it's not like, you know, I can invest money or do something or sell a product or whatever. Food, I think, generally is a core thing that makes people happy. And I tend to think I'm pretty good at making good food. So what keeps me going is to see like people's eyes when I see them bite into something that I cooked and they're like, oh my God, this is so different, or like, this is so flavorful or amazing or whatever it is. I can see it like through the kitchen window, like, oh yeah, that they just bought my fried chicken, because I can see that they're so happy right now. And I get happy when I sell people food that makes them happy, or they can use my food to connect to something that they remember that was a positive experience, or, you know, maybe think differently about like, oh, I thought this is what all Thai food was like because I buy Americanized Thai food. But now that I'm trying something authentic, it's totally different and I like it better. So it's like an educational thing, but also like a necessity, palate pleasing kind of gratification that I get from chefing. I mean, it's like, you don't do it for money. You do it because you love it and you're passionate about it. And I don't work like all these hours because they pay me well enough to like work all these hours. I do it because I want I want to make sure my product is perfect. And so like selling perfect product makes me gratified because I see the reaction that people have when they use it, when they try it, when they eat it.
Mac, what restaurant was that you worked at when I came in and was able
That was at Tallulah's, right? Pacific Palisades.
Tallulah's? So I come to Tallulah's because I watched all your posts on social media and the food you were posting. I was like, I gotta go see what this food's about. I gotta go see what my guy is doing. And I just
Yeah.
happened to be over there doing some work. And man, you rolled out the here's a thing that I realized that is so different about all right, there are people who can cook, like my mom can cook, people can cook. There are people who can throw some things together, and then there are chefs. And what I loved about what you created was every bite was the perfect bite,
Right.
and every bite had a beginning, middle, end. There's no other way I know how to place that, but there were notes. And because I was talking to my girl last night, I had made some rabbit yesterday,
Yeah.
and I was like, the rabbit was good, but it was missing a note. It was missing a like it was almost like it had a beginning, middle, no end, or it had a beginning, end, no middle. It was something missing, and chefs understand you have to eat this before you eat that because the flavors from this will enhance that, or or it needs some bitter to accent the blah blah blah. And then also there's the color, and then there's the texture. There's just so much that goes into plating a dish
Right.
and creating a dish besides salt and butter, right? Salt, fat, acid, heat.
I mean, that's a great book. I love that book. But
Such a great book.
It's composition, and that's what like most home cooks need to study if they want to like next level their home cooking, because it's about composition. It's not just like I need a puree, a salad, and a protein, or a sauce and this and that. You need the composition, and that's why I love Asian food, because it's always, no matter what country's food you're cooking, it's generally sweet, salty, spicy, sour. And so each country uses different ingredients to, move the scale on either of those components. And so like, it's beautiful because when you use those four elements, you don't have to really measure things. It's like, oh, it's too salty, add more sugar or palm sugar or whatever your sweetener is. If it's too sour, add more chilies, whatever it is. Like there's always like this easy way to balance how it tastes. And I think like sometimes you're like, do I really want like some palm sugar in my fried rice? It's like, well, yeah, because you have to have it there because it's going to be too bitter or too sour or whatever without that little bit of sugar in there. And everything is like a balancing act. So like the composition of what you eat is like the easy thing. I didn't know about it before I like learned how to cook well. I mean, I always cooked like good food that people wanted to come over and do dinner parties and stuff like that. But, I was making like food that didn't look great, that didn't have all those profiles that were hit. When you can balance it, that's the beauty of food, is when you balance all the different things that go in there. Like you said, like even texturally, you'll want to have something crunchy on like every plate. You don't want to just have everything be all mushy and taste great. You need to have that balance of texture, the balance of flavor. And when you can figure that out, then like you can just do whatever you want with ingredients. You can put whatever ingredients you want together as long as you have all that balance figured out. You know what I mean?
All right, so I'm gonna be a little selfish because we're wrapping up, but I
All
just had some sashimi, fatty, bluefin tuna,
Okay.
and I just threw some New Zealand sea salt on there on top of that.
Right.
What else could I put on there? Because I'm thinking maybe I should have something a little crunchy to sprinkle on top. Or
Yeah, I mean, I would have done like maybe some kind of like ponzu or like a chili sauce, and then fried garlic, fried shallots, maybe like potato chippy, little like heirloom potato chips you can kind of spread out on there. Something like that adds a different texture than just like squishy sashimi. I mean, I love like poke and sashimi, but usually when you get like a poke bowl, right, they would have like the fish. They would have some kind of like sweet sauce. They would have some kind of spicy element. something chewy like a seaweed or something that's like a little bit of chewiness because the fish should kind of just be buttery. But they have like something sweet, something spicy, something crunchy, something soft like the fish. All that will go together. You know, I would do like a great ponzu for raw fish is just straight up sweet soy sauce and vinegar, and then maybe a little bit of pepper, something like that, and then hit it with something crunchy. Fry something up, anything, you know, really garlic or shallot or onions or whatever.
So besides your cookbook, Eat with Purpose, get that cookbook, and I ordered mine. I got it as a downloadable.
Did you make any of those recipes?
You know what? I have not. I am not, because here's what I realized. I'm going to need to get the physical book. I don't do well. This is why I don't have a Kindle. I don't do well with PDFs and downloadables. I need physical books where I can write and scribble and make a mess.
Highlight stuff.
Because I'll forget about it, which is exactly until I had you back on here. I completely forgot I downloaded. I was like, oh, yeah, I have his book.
Right.
But is there a fiction book, not nonfiction, not self-help, but is there a fiction book that really has resonated with you?
Mostly I read like relationship psychology books and like self-help stuff. So like,
tell me a relationship book.
What I'm reading right now is called The Power of Attachment, written by a PhD named Dr. Heller. And it's kind of all about like how to create lasting, intimate relationships. I mean, that's kind of goes along with this topic, right? It's very interesting. I mean, kind of talks about like from the therapist point of view, which I don't generally like. I mean, I'm cool. I have like, I don't know. I have 2 therapists right now, but last time I was in a relationship, I guess I had 3 therapists. But I do like reading about it from the therapy point of view, relationship psychology, because it's not that much different. You know,
what was the takeaway from that book? Power of Attachment by Heller. What stands out to you so far?
I think it's like kind of cutting yourself a little bit of slack for things that maybe don't work in your favor just because of the possibly trying to focus that energy on the wrong person or somebody that's like not copacetic for what you want or doesn't have the same long-term goals or long-term needs or wants. So like the attachment thing, it's easy. Like I think like the power of attachment is something that like a lot of people struggle with, because from the beginning, usually when you meet somebody, it's like that attachment just seems like really solid, and then you don't know much about each other. But it's more of like how to make the better decisions to attract the right person, where like that attachment could be long serving.
Oh, so reading that, is there something when you look back, you go, oh, I see where I could have done this, or here's something I want to do moving forward.
Definitely. And like it's helped me identify some red flags. Like, you know, I do a lot of internet dating. I used to write a blog in LA called neverhadabaddate.com. And I went on 100 or something like that, 15-minute dates. And I wrote about all of them. And like, it was cool, man. I mean, it was very confusing to women in LA because they either had like boyfriends or husbands and they just wanted to get a dinner out of a date or something like that. Or they'd be like, what do you mean you don't want to hook up? And I'm like, well, I don't. I just wanted to meet you and see if I wanted to go on a second date. And I'm going to write about it on my blog. So you can read it if you want, but you know, it is what it is. But I think like it taught me a little bit more about how to spend your resources and not to be so forward thinking, like in attaching to somebody who you don't know that well. I mean, more like identifying red flags. And so like a lot of the red flags I identify now are like, you know, if it's too emotional from the get-go, probably, you know, take a step back. If it's if there's no connection from the beginning, probably, you know, take a step back. I don't know, more so like there's no formula, right? Like we've all had relationships where we jumped in really quick and It was like super emotional and awesome and seemingly perfect from the beginning, and then it didn't work out. And then we also had relationships in our lives probably where we took things slow. We waited until we felt what we said, and then it still didn't work out. So if there's a formula that is like foolproof, I would read that book too. But there isn't.
You bring up a great point, and which is there's no formula, and I think this all ties in perfectly to the very beginning of what we were talking about in terms of you're standing on a chair, you're looking out the window, and it's because you're feeling like you failed, like there's something you could have done differently, like there was a right formula, like
Right.
there was a recipe for how to have the perfect marriage and to stay committed to each other for like you said, your adopted parents been together for 55 years, and as you're sharing, there isn't, and this is so important for the listeners out there. Like, yeah, there's things that you could have done differently, but you would have had a different outcome, and that doesn't mean that it would have been a better outcome. We tend to think that if we did something different, then things would end up better. But
Right.
sometimes if we did something different, they could end up worse. So we don't know, and that's the beauty of life. It's the adventure of life. It's the it's why it's so good to allow ourselves to get lost and to explore and to explore in relationships, you know, walk into stores and explore. Just have a kind of a wandering experience. And like you said, when you got married, you're like, hey, let's see what happens. Let's
Right.
see what this feels like. And, you've demonstrated your commitment to Portis. You've demonstrated your commitment to your wife and to your craft. So, I applaud you. And the fact that after so many years of not, seeing your mom, and you could be walking around with this anger and this resentment, which might be there on some level still, right? Who knows what'll come up for you 5 years, 10 years from now, as the emotions start to shift and other things maybe come up. But it takes a lot of courage to be vulnerable and to share and sit down with your mom and to say, I still want this relationship. I still want to
Yeah.
try, and I'm going to commit to this, and and let's see what happens. So
Yeah.
I applaud you, Mac.
Thank you, sir. And I'm still thinking like, I may still remarry and have kids. Who the hell knows? Who knows? I mean, life is infinite. And I think that's something to think about too, because we all think, and a lot of people hit me up when they are going through difficult relationship things because they want my advice. And I always think like, well, why do you want my advice? I have never had one of these things that worked out, you know? But I think like it's a very common dilemma, and that's probably why you want to talk about it. Like everybody goes through the same things, and I think more so it's like how you digest, learn, and incorporate in your future life what you go through that's hard. That like the life lessons and all that stuff. And man, at least I'm old now, but at least I know more. I feel like, but then you pop into the next thing and you're like, oh my god, I don't know anything, and then you learn from the next one and hopefully carry that on through the rest of your life.
Digest, learn, and incorporate. I love it, Mac. Mac, what are you looking forward to?
I am looking forward to smashing the next week before Christmas, and then I am going to go head on vacation to Jamaica with a beautiful redhead. So I'm looking forward to that.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I love it. I love it. And then last question, because I ask this of all my guests, because I always imagine there's one person out there who might be on the precipice of wanting to end their life. Before you
Yeah,
kill
man.
yourself, what would you say to them, Mac?
The moment is the most difficult time, and I think like, and we talk about Anthony Bourdain and all the other Robin Williams and all these beautiful people that so many people loved, and it's always that moment. No matter how much pain you're going through, it's that one moment. And like we go through so many of these terrible moments and difficult moments in our lives, but if you can figure out a way to just like push through that moment and find a purpose, like you're just going to be thanking yourself so much that you decided to, get off that windowsill.
That's right. Push. Now I don't want to say push through the pain. Sit with the pain, and at some point, the purpose will reveal itself. Sometimes in the form of a dog. When I posted on Facebook what has gotten people through divorces, they mentioned therapy, family,
Yeah.
friends, yoga, music, dancing, long cry drives,
Yeah.
time, enrolling in college, new environments, setting new goals, guitar, piano, surfing,
Yeah.
Beyonce's Lemonade, dating adventures, video games, and karaoke. Is there anything you want to add to that list, Mac?
I would take music off that list because when you're going through some stuff like that, music is probably the worst thing you could ever pop into. I mean, it's like, I remember when I was going through my divorce, the most popular song on the radio was that song, Somebody That I Used to Know, from Gyote, or whatever the band's name was, Gote. Now you're just somebody that I used to know. And I would hear that song like 10 times a day on K-Rock in LA. And I just wanted to like drive off the side of the PCH.
Wow.
I would say like, not just going through the divorce, but like anytime you're dealing with real loss trauma like that, it's like all those people you kind of dog when you're in the relationship, all your friends who are like real friends, like you gotta just lean on people that care about you, because they didn't go away, even though maybe your relationships changed since you were with somebody else. You know what I mean? Like when you're really suffering, people pop out of the woodwork who actually mattered. And I think like it's important to lean on those people.
Absolutely. And you're right. Music is so powerful because it could either make you want to drive off the cliff or it could make you want to keep driving. And so what I love about Spotify and Pandora, they have these curated playlists, because I know when I went through a breakup, and it's not a divorce, I put together my own playlist to make sure that the songs would impact me the way that I want to. And
A
so,
positive
right.
way.
Yeah. So right up there is NSYNC's Bye Bye Bye, uh,
Yeah, I mean, I think also like don't forget to laugh, and like I know you make people laugh. That's like a daily, but don't forget to make yourself laugh and to find some kind of like humor even in difficult times, because I think that kind of balances out your emotions a little bit and makes you realize that you're not like a failure, or your life is just normal and this kind of thing just happens.
Absolutely. Mac, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much to listeners for tuning in. Remember, this podcast is not a substitute for you going to get help, for you calling the 1-800-SUICIDE or 1-800-273-TALKS. Remember, there are international phone numbers in each and every one of these show notes, no matter where you are in the world. If you're in Taiwan, if you're in Kenya, if you're in Budapest, no matter where you are, Canada, Toronto, Texas, chime in. If you're in Virginia, my boy Mac is, born in Virginia, raised in D.C. There are phone numbers for you to listen, get help. You can talk, you can chat, you can text. You can go to thrivewithleo.com for one-on-one coaching with yours truly. Let's get to tomorrow together. Thank you so much, Chef Mac.
Thank you, brother. Love you.